Sarah Thompson, a janitor at a large company, secretly holds the majority of its shares. After witnessing the unethical actions of CEO Victor Reed, she decides to overthrow him, expose the truth, and reform the company, creating a fairer work environment. Sarah Thompson, 38 years old, works at Wilkinson & Company, one of the leading tech companies in Silicon Valley, California. Every day, she quietly moves through the shiny offices and modern meeting rooms, cleaning and maintaining the workspace. However, to the executives and higher-ups, Sarah is invisible. She is unnoticed, without a voice, and treated with disregard as just another tool in the company's operations. They see her as no more than a cleaning service, nothing more. Wilkinson & Company is known as a symbol of success in the tech industry, with impressive strides and remarkable achievements in the global market. However, beneath this glossy exterior lies a toxic work environment where Victor Reed, the CEO, runs the company with an iron fist. He is greedy and authoritarian, caring only about profits and indifferent to the feelings or contributions of lower-level employees like Sarah. The senior executives focus solely on their own interests, while those like Sarah work tirelessly, never getting the recognition they deserve. Wrong decisions and injustices happen daily in the shadows, with no one able to speak up. For years, Sarah Thompson worked at Wilkinson & Company, becoming a keen observer. While she was just a janitor, her job allowed her to overhear the confidential conversations of executives and uncover unethical activities happening behind closed doors. She didn't just clean the meeting rooms, she also cleaned up the dark secrets of the company. Sarah, however, wasn't just an ordinary employee. She was the largest shareholder of Wilkinson & Company, a power she inherited from her late husband, David Thompson, who had invested in the company from its early days. David had seen the potential of Wilkinson & Company when it was still small, and through strategic investments, he had accumulated a significant number of shares. After David passed away, Sarah became the majority shareholder, a power that no one knew about, as she had never openly used it. Over the years, she had quietly worked as a janitor, keeping the company clean, never drawing attention to herself. But that power, kept as a secret, was the key to changing the fate of Wilkinson & Company. Although Sarah had no experience in running a company, she had learned much from the conversations she overheard, the poor decisions made by executives, the discussions about unjustly firing employees, and the secrets of improper spending within the company. She stored all these in her mind. Every day, as she cleaned the hallways and meeting rooms, she became like a tape recorder, capturing truths no one else knew. From this, Sarah realized that she wasn't just invisible, but also held a major advantage: the shareholder power she could wield to change the company's trajectory. In her heart, Sarah had decided that one day she would confront the executives, expose all the injustices, and make the necessary changes. She wasn't someone who acted impulsively. Sarah understood that patience was the key to winning this battle. She had quietly prepared, gathered information, and meticulously planned each step. However, she never showed any sign of her intentions. With her calm, unassuming exterior, Sarah became the epitome of patience, meticulous observation, and the ability to hide power behind her invisibility. Sarah wasn't just a janitor. She held the key to the company's future, someone who could change everything with just one decision. The executives and CEO at Wilkinson & Company had no idea that the person they always overlooked, the one they saw as unimportant, was the very person who would transform the company forever. One evening, when most employees had already left the office, Sarah Thompson continued her usual routine of cleaning the meeting rooms. The air was quiet, with only the sound of her footsteps echoing on the polished floors of the hallways. Sarah often worked late, when no one was around to notice her presence. But that evening, while cleaning the meeting room, she accidentally overheard a conversation from inside the room. The door wasn't fully closed, and the voices of the senior executives slipped into her ears. At first, she tried to focus on her task, but soon the words they were saying began to build up a sense of anger inside her. "We need to cut costs, and low-level employees will be the first target," one voice harshly said. "They don't bring any value to the company. They're just people who can't contribute anymore." Sarah felt her heart tighten as she heard those words. She had worked alongside her colleagues for years, witnessed their struggles, and saw how hard they worked, yet they were always overlooked and underappreciated. To hear those executives talk about firing hardworking people just to save money without any regard for their lives was a betrayal Sarah couldn't ignore. "Just cut the employees and keep the ones who can bring profit," the voice continued. "These low-level workers don't matter. No one in this company will even remember them." Sarah was stunned. She couldn't believe that the leaders she had always thought were smart and responsible could so easily talk about eliminating employees for financial gain without a shred of compassion. Those words hit Sarah like a slap in the face. For the first time, she truly realized the rot that lay beneath the surface of the company she had served so faithfully. She and her colleagues, those who worked day in and day out, were seen as nothing more than expendable tools to increase profits. Sarah knew that this was a tipping point. She could no longer just be an observer. She had to act. That night, Sarah started collecting every piece of evidence she could find. She was no longer just watching from the sidelines. She began paying attention to every conversation, taking notes on the financial transactions, and even catching snippets of confidential meetings. She found records of excessive and unnecessary spending, shady business deals, and decisions made by CEO Victor Reed and other executives that harmed employees. Every piece of evidence she collected, every conversation she overheard, and every document she found were like building blocks of a bigger truth, one that would expose the company's deep corruption. Sarah knew that continuing to stay silent was no longer an option. She couldn't just sit back and watch the injustice unfold. She had witnessed enough. Armed with the knowledge she had gathered, Sarah knew she had the power to bring about change. She had a secret that no one knew about. Her late husband, David Thompson, had invested heavily in Wilkinson and Company from the very beginning. After his death, Sarah inherited a majority of the company's shares. Although she had never used her power before, she now realized that she held the key to making things right. Sarah carefully planned her next steps. She prepared for a confrontation, knowing that the upcoming shareholders meeting would be her chance to expose the truth. Armed with undeniable evidence, she was ready to confront Victor Reed and the executives who had manipulated and exploited the hardworking employees for their own gain. This wasn't just about a job or a paycheck anymore. It was about standing up for what was right, about ensuring that the people who worked hard every day were treated with the respect and fairness they deserved. Sarah was no longer just the cleaning lady. She was the one holding the company's future in her hands, and she was prepared to fight for it. The day of the reckoning had finally arrived. It was the important shareholders meeting, a day when major decisions about the company's future would be made. The entire company buzzed with tension, but Sarah knew that today she would no longer be invisible. She would no longer be the silent janitor who faded into the background. Today, Sarah would walk into the meeting room, not with a broom or trash can, but with a briefcase full of evidence exposing the wrongdoings of the executives. Each document, each report, each audio recording she had gathered over months were crucial pieces to reveal the corruption that Victor Reed, the CEO, and his colleagues had worked so hard to conceal. As Sarah stepped into the building that morning, she could feel her heart racing. She had prepared meticulously for this day. Her attire was sharp, her mind was steady, and most importantly, she had the undeniable evidence. Everything had been planned down to the finest detail. In her approach, her presentation, and the undeniable proof she was about to present. She couldn't afford to let anxiety or fear take over. She knew that today she wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for every employee who had been wronged, for those who had been exploited by the system for years. When Sarah entered the meeting room, the executives gathered around the table were deep in conversation about financial strategies and profit goals for the coming year. They didn't expect Sarah's appearance. As she stepped into the room, the air changed instantly. Their voices trailed off, and all eyes turned toward her. Victor Reed, the CEO, sat at the head of the table with his usual smug grin, but when he saw Sarah, his expression shifted to one of surprise. He smirked mockingly. "You're here to clean up again, aren't you?" he sneered, his voice dripping with condescension. A quiet laugh spread through the room, but Sarah didn't flinch. She had prepared for this moment. She knew the mockery was coming, but it would not deter her. She placed the briefcase firmly on the table in front of Reed, took a deep breath, and opened it. As she pulled out the documents, financial reports, emails, and incriminating notes, she felt a calm resolve flood her. These were the irrefutable pieces of evidence, each one meticulously collected to expose the company's corrupt practices. No one in the room could deny what was about to be laid bare. Sarah began speaking with a quiet but unwavering voice. "You've lied to your employees, lied to your shareholders, and lied to this company," she stated, her eyes locking onto each person in the room. "You've prioritized profits over everything, treating people like disposable tools, and I've witnessed it all." The room fell silent. The executives, once so confident and dismissive, now sat frozen. The smug smiles faded, replaced by an uneasy tension. Sarah was no longer a mere observer. She was the one in control. She went on to detail the unethical actions, the inflated expense reports, the unfair layoffs, and the manipulative tactics used by Victor Reed. and his team to maximize their wealth at the expense of the employees. Each word she spoke felt like a blow to their carefully constructed facade. Sarah was no longer the invisible janitor. She was the one holding the power to change everything. The room was deathly quiet. No one moved. The executives, once so sure of their position, now realized they were at Sarah's mercy. In that moment, the balance of power shifted. Sarah wasn't just a cleaning lady anymore. She was the one who had the authority to bring justice to a corrupt system, to restore fairness to a company that had long been ruled by greed, and she was ready to take action. When Sarah opened the briefcase and placed the documents on the table in front of the executives, the atmosphere in the room immediately shifted. All eyes were on her, but Sarah didn't flinch. Despite spending years as an invisible janitor, today she was the one holding the key to exposing the truth behind the company's polished exterior. She wasn't here to clean the meeting room like they always assumed. She was here to face them, to bring forth the undeniable evidence of their wrongdoings that they had hidden for so long. "I'm not here to clean up," Sarah said, her voice calm but sharp, cutting through the tense silence in the room. "I'm here to reveal the truth you've been hiding for all these years." Her words rang clear, without hesitation, leaving no room for doubt. The room went dead silent. Each person in the room could feel the shift in the air, from the smug confidence they had earlier, now replaced by a palpable unease. Sarah began to lay out the evidence, pulling out the documents one by one. First, she pointed to the fraudulent expenditures, unauthorized bills approved by executives to siphon funds from the company, payments made to shady business partners for the sole purpose of enriching the higher-ups while ignoring the needs of their hard-working employees. She continued to present the fake contracts, the manipulation of deals, and the unjust firing of innocent employees, all carefully hidden behind corporate jargon and deceit. The room was now heavy with tension. No one dared speak. The executives, once so confident and dismissive, now sat motionless, unable to deny the truth that was unfolding before them. Sarah wasn't done yet. She moved on to reveal illegal asset acquisitions by top executives. Not only had they been mismanaging funds, but they were also seizing valuable assets from the company for personal gain, all while the company's financial stability hung by a thread. The confrontation in the meeting room grew incredibly tense. Victor Reed, the CEO of the company, a man who had always been self-assured and arrogant, now sat trembling before the irrefutable evidence Sarah had presented. His face turned bright red and his voice began to shake with panic. "Who allowed you to do this? Who do you think you are standing up against me?" Reed shouted, his hands waving as if trying to threaten her. However, in the face of his words, Sarah did not back down. She had no hesitation, for what she was doing was right. She wasn't afraid, nor was she confused. Instead, she stood firm, her eyes sharp but resolute, staring directly at Reed and the board members. The atmosphere in the room grew suffocating. The board members sat in silence, their eyes fixed on the evidence Sarah had laid out. The documents she presented were too clear to deny. Reed's wrongdoings, his fraudulent activities, and the manipulation of power were no longer something that could be concealed. Sarah not only exposed Reed's corruption, but also pointed out how he had exploited the company and its hardworking employees solely for personal gain. Reed looked at the board members with pleading eyes, but it was too late. The board members, who had once admired and worked under his leadership, now had nothing but disdain. A few of them started whispering, others glanced at one another, and slowly they all turned to look at Sarah. She had proven that with the power she held and the truth she brought, she could reverse everything. No one could stand by Reed when his actions had been laid bare. Finally, a decision was made. The board members, once loyal to Reed, now collectively voted to remove him from his position as CEO. Reed's allies, those who had been part of his shady dealings, dared not oppose. They knew that no matter how much they stood by him, the truth was undeniable. Reed no longer held power, no longer had a position, and all that remained was the solitude in the ruins he had created. Minutes later, in the ominous silence, security entered the room. They came to escort Reed out, to remove him from the place he had ruled for so many years. No excuses, no more defiance. Reed was taken away, and his fall came without resistance. Watching him be escorted out, stripped of power, stripped of his arrogance, Sarah stood still. Her gaze was cold, but in her eyes was a sense of strong resolve. This was the moment Sarah had waited for, a moment when those who caused so much pain, manipulated, and abused power finally had to face the consequences. After Ufashos, Victor Reed. Where he was removed, Sarah didn't just stop at removing the greedy and corrupt leader from power. She immediately set about implementing sweeping reforms to build a fairer company, one where all employees would be respected and given the opportunity to thrive. She not only wanted to clean up the leadership, but also ensure that hardworking employees would never again have to endure the injustices they had suffered before. Sarah began by raising the wages of lower-level employees, those who had worked tirelessly for many years without receiving the recognition they deserved. This was a crucial first step, as she understood that one of the reasons employees felt neglected and undervalued was the disparity in pay. Not only did Sarah increase their wages, but she also introduced performance-based bonuses, ensuring that each employee was rewarded fairly for their contributions. She also adjusted benefits policies to ensure employees had a safe and supportive working environment, both physically and mentally. In addition to improving salaries, Sarah implemented ethics and company culture training programs. She realized that it wasn't just about changing financial policies, it was about transforming the mindset and culture of the company. These training programs helped employees understand their responsibilities, the importance of respect in the workplace, and their rights to fair treatment. To ensure fairness, Sarah also established an open feedback system where every employee could voice their concerns or suggestions without fear of retaliation. She also introduced humane policies designed to create a work environment that was not only fair, but also compassionate. Sarah believed that a successful company wasn't just about talented people, but also about fostering a culture of respect, kindness, and support. She encouraged employees to work not only for personal gain, but also for the collective success of the company and the well-being of their colleagues. These changes didn't happen overnight, but Sarah worked tirelessly, always looking for ways to improve the company and bring greater benefit to everyone involved. With these reforms in place, Sarah gradually earned the respect of her colleagues. Those who had once seen her as just a janitor now recognized her as a true leader who had transformed the company. They realized that success doesn't always come from those with power, but from those who stand up for justice and fairness. Every decision Sarah made was driven by one clear goal: to create a company where every employee felt valued and had equal opportunities to grow. One morning, as Sarah walked down the hallway as usual, she encountered a former employee, someone who had been unjustly fired during Victor Reed's tenure. He stopped, his eyes filled with gratitude, and said, "Thank you for bringing justice to us." It was a simple but meaningful thank you. Sarah smiled gently, but deep down she knew that what she had done was just the beginning. There was still much work to be done, and the journey of reform was far from over. But in that moment, the gratitude from the people she had helped was a powerful motivation to keep moving forward. Finally, after a long day's work, Sarah stood by the office window, gazing out at the bustling city of New York under the fading light of the late afternoon. The towering buildings, once symbols of ambition and power, now reflected a different story, a story of change, justice, and resilience. Sarah was no longer invisible. She was the largest shareholder of Wilkinson and Company. But more importantly, she was the one who had changed the face of the company, bringing it from the shadows into the light. Sarah's story proved that patience and a well-thought-out plan could bring about change in a corrupt system. Sometimes, those whom society deems unimportant are the ones who can create the biggest changes. When an individual dares to stand up for justice, not only will they change their own life, but they will change the system forever. Sarah proved this, and her journey had only just begun.